Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jan Walmsley. I was advisor to this project and I'm Professor of the History of Learning Disability at the Open University. I'm really sorry I'm not with you today. I had a clash of dates for this launch and so Tim asked me to video myself and my daughter's kindly obliged. And my job really is to talk about the context for this project. Prideaux Hospital was opened just before the First World War, and it was one of many local authority run hospitals, then called colonies, set up for people with learning difficulties. And they were the result of what you might call a moral panic about people with learning difficulties in the early 20th century. There was a belief that they were breeding more quickly than the more intelligent parts of the population, and that if nothing was done about it, people with low intelligence would soon outnumber the rest of the population. It's quite incredible to think this now, but that was a belief then. And it was also believed that that deficiency, mental deficiency as it was called, was inherited. So that not only would these people have lots of children, those children were very likely to share their intellectual limitations. Various solutions were canvassed, and the one that was adopted was segregation, that people would be put into institutions, the sexes would be kept apart, they wouldn't be able to have children, and they would lead what was thought to be a reasonable life. They weren't intended to be punitive when they were set up. Unfortunately, as with so many institutions, they became inward-looking, there was a lack of investment, there was a lack of external scrutiny, there were very few visitors, and abusive practices were able to flourish. Even when there weren't abusive practices, people led very limited lives. They couldn't cook for themselves, they couldn't make themselves a drink, they couldn't choose to go out when they felt like it. They were virtually incarcerated within the grounds of the hospital. Now, this system of care became increasingly discredited from the later 20th century. In 1969 there was a scandal which was not unlike the Winterbourne View scandal, discovered at Ely Hospital in Cardiff, and they'd ignored whistleblowers. A staff member was saying there were abusive practices going on, the authorities didn't listen, and in the end the staff member went to the News of the World. Eerily like the sequence of events that led to the discovery of what was going on in Winterbourne View. The government gradually, very cautiously, committed itself to a closure programme. Probably from the 1980s. It's actually quite difficult to say when that decision was made. It took an enormously long time to close them. The last NHS facility closed in 2010, so only 3 years ago. The project uncovers the memories of people who lived in Prideaux Hospital, and they are very moving. The residents' stories, I think, really point to the limitations of such a life, and the contrast for most of them with how they're living now, with a lot more autonomy, freedom, respect, and pleasure to be got out of life. However, I think it's salutary to remember that institutions were not set up to be punitive. They were set up partly to segregate people. They were also set up as places where people could have sanctuary, where people who were being abused or neglected, unable to support themselves, could be left. I call them at one point convenient places for inconvenient people. And I think we'd be fooling ourselves to say that those issues have gone away just because we've closed institutions. They haven't. And I think we're seeing now a clawing back of many of the services which replaced institutions, day centres, hostels, things that were put in place called community care. We're now seeing those being dismantled. And the idea is a very good one, that people should take their place alongside other citizens, not to be have special facilities where they go. And it's a very positive idea. But there is a fear in my mind that we may be going back to a time when a lot of people will be neglected. Some people will not be well treated by their families and friends, and we still have that issue to think about. The other issue I want to leave you with today is that we haven't got rid of institutions. The Panorama programme about Winterbourne View and subsequent investigation by the Care Quality Commission have shown that there are plenty of institutions still around. They're just not run directly by the state. They're run often in the private sector. Some of those institutions do a very good job, but we need to be aware that they are there, and this temptation to set up convenient places to put inconvenient people is still with us. Institutions are very rarely going to be a suitable long-term place for people to live. The tendencies for abuse, for disrespect, for depersonalisation are so strong when we put a group of devalued people together that we really must resist that. And projects like this are an excellent way of reminding ourselves why, that the human stories behind No Going Back are a really stirring call to arms. We must not go back, and we must not set up more of these settings where people live unprofitable and often very damaged lives. I wish I could be with you. I commend the project to you. The book is absolutely excellent, and Tim and Kelly did a fantastic job in pulling the project together, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it. Thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon. Okay?